Hey, everybody, welcome to our weekly Bible reading check in. I'm Andrew, this is Mike, and well, let's be honest, this hasn't been weekly the last little bit. We got behind.
It's been crazy. Let's just put it that way.
So, if you're watching this video, hopefully you've already read Jeremiah and then some, but we're going to go back and talk about
It's
it.
a little bit late.
We're a little late. Don't throw stones, don't throw tomatoes. So, let's talk about Jeremiah chapter 30.
30 on and
through
then
52, and then we'll talk about Lamentations. So, people who've been following our reading schedule should have read this already. When we last talked about Jeremiah, we were kind of down in the dumps with it. I mean, it was pretty gloomy stuff. It wasn't great for reading.
Pretty much everything was bad.
Yeah.
Or at least Jeremiah was telling them how bad it was going to be, and they didn't believe him. Basically, nobody believed him.
Nobody.
They chose to believe the other guys who were saying the opposite. Nah, everything's fine. We got the temple, like that kind of stuff. And the people bought it, the leadership bought it.
Yeah.
So Jeremiah really was basically on his own.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm sorry. I'm sure there are lots of people who did believe him, but in terms of the nation,
well, on the whole, that was
not.
not the norm. I mean, you talk about somebody who was literally, we use the phrase sometimes, talking into the wind, like you're just talking and nobody's listening. It feels like that's what Jeremiah was doing.
Yeah.
He was warning after warning after warning, and they didn't care to hear him. Instead, some of the things we saw, it's fine. Peace, when there is no peace, right? They were trying to convince themselves everything was going to be okay,
Right.
and it wasn't. So that was really, I mean, the first half of the book was just awful. We get a little bit of hope.
The second half of the book is just awful. But yes,
There's a little bit of hope.
there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. So there's, one of the most memorable chapters in Jeremiah is Jeremiah chapter 31. Because Jeremiah, in the midst of all of this terrible stuff, Jeremiah stops and says, God has plans to make this new covenant.
Right.
And so that's kind of, that's for me where the hope kind of centers. It's okay, there's
Right.
hope. And it's not hope that you might not go into captivity.
Right.
But it's hope beyond captivity, that God can make something out of the situation.
Right. Because that's a done deal. We've established that. We talked about that last time. That's happening. There's no change. And then so chapter 31 is huge. I mean, to me, it's kind of the wheel around which the whole thing turns. And the Hebrew writer points it out.
Mm-hmm.
This is it. This is why we're here. This is what we're doing. So it's hugely important, theologically, for Christians to understand this change.
Yeah, there's probably I remember I had a teacher one time who asked us to memorize a handful of key Old Testament passages, and they're just some important ones that you need to know if you want to kind of know the story. And this is one of them that he said was one of the most important Old Testament passages to know.
Yeah.
Because this is what drives the story forward. It's this hope that God's going to create a new covenant, which is interesting because God has a covenant, right? He's got a covenant with Israel, covenant established on Mount Sinai, and this is going to be a major shakeup for Israel because, they kind of hold on to that covenant. That is their hope, but God's got something new coming in their future.
I mean, we could spend hours just there.
Yeah.
But, I mean, basically, he said it's going to be new. It's going to be different. It's going to be better. It's going to not be sort of physically based like the other one was. And I think that's been misunderstood. That certainly was misunderstood by them and the people that came later. And it, again, sort of takes the Holy Spirit through New Testament writers, again, especially I think through the Hebrew writer, to help us fully appreciate what really was going on there. And there are still two people today who say, no, that's it's something else.
Yeah.
And hanging on to Israel and the physical Israel, and that tells us it's not really going to work that way anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So and also in this section, we talked about it. The temple is going to be destroyed. It gets destroyed, and the most of this, like 10 chapters, is devoted to that whole scenario, which happened a couple of decades later from this first invasion and captivity. So all that gets done away with, and God's saying, I'm gonna do another one, a better one.
Yeah.
And the Hebrew writer tells us this was all part of the plan. It's done on purpose, and he uses the idea of shadow and that kind of thing. So this again, I'm with you. Like if you're gonna learn 10 Old Testament scriptures, this has to be one of them. Jeremiah 31 has to be one of them.
Yeah. No. So Jeremiah has this nugget of hope. Like, hey guys, there's a little bit of hope beyond the captivity. But then almost immediately, if you turn to chapter 32, it's back to just terrible stuff. People aren't listening still. People refuse to hear what he says, to want to acknowledge what he says. In fact, this is where a lot of the story in Jeremiah comes in, where he ends up being thrown in prison. He ends up being carted off to Egypt against his will. All kinds of stuff happens to him, and people just don't listen to anything he says.
Now, can you imagine? And he writes about how this word was burning in him, and he had to say it. Sometimes I feel that way. Probably you do too.
Sure.
I'm sure a lot of people have, but he was really, It's interesting though. You mentioned that 32 because he bought land, right? I remember he bought some properties. Like, I mean, not like he's investing in whatever. He's like, I'm buying property because we're coming back.
Yeah.
And that was another one of the, we talked last time, I think, about these things that he does.
Odd activities of the prophets.
Yeah, that's what you said. Yeah. And then Ezekiel, we'll get to that later. Same thing. So he goes and he buys land. Like, people are like, why are you buying land? We're invaded. It's over. And he said, yes, it's over for now. And I think, you're talking about for now and this light. I mean, Daniel, remember, we'll get to Daniel. Daniel's read Jeremiah and he's praying about it, and he has these visions because he wanted to know what Jeremiah meant. Jeremiah told him 70 years. So there is an end date, or an expiration date on this. So there's so much going on here, but it is the complete annihilation of the temple and of the city.
Yeah. What's interesting about Jeremiah buying land is you said while you were talking about that he's convinced that they're coming back. He should be. God told him they were going to come back. But I'm just reminded of another Old Testament story where somebody bought land in Israel way back when Abraham was wandering on the land. He bought a small portion of the land to bury Sarah in.
Right.
And that was the same kind of thing. He bought it as a sort of entrance into ownership of the land. In a very small way, God was telling him, you will receive this land. And Jeremiah's doing the same thing Abraham did. Yeah. And the people should have made those kinds of connections. We've seen this before. Abraham, our forefather, bought land.
Which, by the way, is something we should do all the time when we're reading Scripture.
Yes.
I've seen this before. We've seen this pattern before, over and over and over. And, this is exactly it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We want to talk about Lamentations as well, but I there's only so many times I can say things were really bad in Jeremiah without going into all of the details. Was there anything else you wanted to pull out?
No, not really. Just again, even at the end, hope's alive. Like, that's the message really of this. Really, I guess, of the whole book. You're going to captivity. There's nothing you can do, but that's not the end.
Yeah.
Right? Everything gets destroyed, but that's not the end. Which, I guess we could sit there and dwell on that for a long time, but that's the kind of the point, right? Everything gets destroyed, but that's not the end. Why? Because that's not what's really important. The temple, even the land, none of that's what's really important. And that new covenant language talks about people who are, the law's written on their heart, they're faithful people, they're people that have chosen it, is going to resonate now. Now, they will go back and they will rebuild it to a degree, but it's never the same. It's never anything like what they were.
Yeah.
But even at the end, um, one of the threads we've been following is the kings.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about Jesus will be the king. Well, they're kings in prison, right? And it's almost like the line of kings is going to end, except he's not. The king gets let go and lives. And so while they won't actually for a long time, they won't have any real kings. They'll have a couple, here and there, Maccabees and all that. But then Jesus comes along. He's like, I can trace my lineage through the kings both ways. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's important too.
Just
to keep that going. I don't think you don't probably read the end of Jeremiah and the king gets let go and be thinking, oh yeah, we gotta have that. I mean, God's still operating in here. So all these little things that show him there's something gonna happen.
Yeah. That last episode, if my memory's correct, we read almost verbatim, and I forget if it was Kings or Chronicles. It was very similar episode there, if not word for word. And it's sort of interesting to see how some of these books start to overlap, and those are things that are helpful as we read, because we're reading Jeremiah out of chronological order from when we were reading all those narratives. And every once in a while, just I guess Bible reading tip, every once in a while you'll find a narrative like that sort of grounds you back to, I can read this alongside this other story that I read where I read the same thing. So those are just good things to keep an eye out for.
That's a good point, and to kind of see where they fit together.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about Lamentations, because Lamentations is an odd book. It's sort of shoved in our Bibles in the middle of what we typically call the major prophets, which are called major prophets strictly because they're bigger books.
They're big books.
Not because they're more important. So, we don't want to leave any false impressions with that. So, Lamentations is odd, though, because Lamentations is a very small book. So, man, Mike, why does it get shoved here?
Well, like, when was the last time anyone's actually read Lamentations on purpose, other than
on purpose
during a Bible reading like this? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Diving into Lamentations for years, probably, other than again just in the course of reading.
But why is that? Why do we not? I mean, I've got ideas about that, but do you have ideas about why we don't read it?
I think we're afraid to a little bit.
Okay.
I think there's probably certain psalms that fit in this category too. It's awkward. It feels weird to read or to hear it because he's basically. It's basically he's called the weeping prophet for this. He's super upset, super sad, and it almost feels like there's no real resolution almost. Yeah. And I think that makes us uncomfortable, and I don't know, probably shouldn't.
So, just in case anybody's not clear about this, Lamentations is written by Jeremiah. So the same prophet that things were really bad for.
Yeah, so that's why it's literally there.
That's why it's there, but it whereas in the prophecy of Jeremiah we get some of this hope and resolution. You're right. Maybe there's a nugget in there that I think maybe we ought to highlight.
There is.
But on the whole, it's just bleak and just depressing. And I mean, the book is called after the lament. It's just the crying and anguish.
Right. And who wants that? I mean, I don't want that in my life. I probably should cry more or at least think about these things more. But I think that's part of it. It just scares people away. And it is, I think it's way overshadowed by Jeremiah and Ezekiel, right? Right there, it's sandwiched in between them. You got, it's almost like the opposite. You got, the meat goes in the sandwich and the outside just the bread. And you might have fancy bread or not, whatever, but it's still just the bread. But here it's like the meat's in Jeremiah and Ezekiel, and there's this little, almost an aside where he's just sad. Nobody likes to be sad.
Yeah.
I don't like to watch sad things. I don't like to read sad things. I just don't.
Yeah. So is there a lesson here for us as Bible readers that maybe we should, for our own benefit, just be willing to sit in discomfort and sadness
I think so.
and just acknowledge that something bad has happened.
Yeah, I think so.
And I mean, obviously here there's something about Jerusalem being destroyed that's sad and monumentally sad for Israel. But even in our own lives, like, is there a lesson here just practically that it's okay to just sit and not be well?
Well, doesn't one of the Psalms tell us, or several of the Psalms, right? It's better to go to the house of mourning than the feasting place, that kind of stuff, which again is so opposite of at least modern Western American culture. We're not about that. Oh, we do funerals, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And people like drama, and I think we did talk about this a little bit, with the Psalms. Some of that's really uncomfortable because it is, or it almost feels like complainy.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we don't want that. We don't want to project that. But I think you're right. I think there's things we need to sit with. That's a good, maybe this idea of meditating on Scripture. Let's meditate on the sadness, the feeling, the emotion. We know why. Maybe part of this he's weeping over their sin.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's part of the lesson is we need to learn to weep over our sin, or the sin of our nation, or that kind of thing. And I suspect if you're like me, you probably think less about that than you should.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a very real sense in which weeping over our sin makes the acknowledgement of Jesus' sacrifice, or in their case, the hope of the new covenant, all the sweeter, right? Mm-hmm. How is it that we can come to appreciate the hope that God gives us? Well, it's because we recognize the depths of our plight.
Right.
And that's a lot of what Lamentations is just, this is how bad it's gotten. If God were to save us, if God is merciful to us, then it would be a great mercy.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I give some fun facts about Lamentations?
Yes, bring it.
All right.
I like fun facts.
Lamentations, there's a lot of times, if you study with me and probably with Mike as well, that we don't always like chapter breaks in the Bible. Lamentations is one of the few exceptions where the chapter breaks are absolutely spot on. And it's super easy to break into chapters, and here's why. Yeah. The book of Lamentations is 5 poems, and each of the 5 poems, with one exception, are acrostic poems. Mm-hmm. And so it's like Psalm 119. Some people are familiar with the acrostic of Psalm 119. Proverbs 31 is an acrostic. In other words, every line of the poem begins with the next successive letter in the Hebrew alphabet. So it's an acrostic poem. And it's very, it's a poetic way of sort of encapsulating all these ideas. From A to Z, this is how sad I am. That's kind of the message here, from A to Z.
And that wouldn't sell a lot of copies.
No, not many children's letter books.
Now, if he turned it into country music, right? Country music is half of it's really
absolutely. Not so good for memorizing letters though. But
yep.
So all of these are acrostics, with 2 exceptions. One, the 5th poem is not an acrostic. It is just chaos. Which is kind of an interesting thing. There's all this form and structure in Lamentations until you get to the end, and it just throws it all out the window, kind of like you're just wailing at that point. I think there's a poetic reason for that. Mm-hmm. And the other exception is the 3rd poem, which is right in the middle, coincidentally. It is an acrostic, but instead of 1 line having a Hebrew letter, it's 3 lines having a Hebrew letter, and so that's sort of a hot place where there's a lot of information. There's a much longer poem, and I'll just point this out as well. When you get to that middle poem, and this is the one verse I want to highlight for people, if you're looking for okay, what's the message here? Because again, it's a lot of doom and gloom throughout this. In Lamentations 3, I think one of the places that we get is this idea that there is still hope. Even in Lamentations, there is this little bit of hope. And so I'm gonna look at verse 31, Lamentations 3, 31 and 32. For the Lord will not reject forever, for if he causes grief, then he will have compassion according to his abundant loving kindness. So even in this book, it's just wailing, gnashing of teeth, and just terrible sadness. There's this thought that God will be faithful, and God can and is willing to forgive, and there's hope there. So those are some of the interesting things.
But that tells you about the faith of Jeremiah, and you see this in David, a lot of Psalms too. Like as bad as things are, they always come back around to something like that.
Yeah.
Always, always, always. And that tells you about the person. So, again, David's a person after God's own heart, not because he was perfect, but because he kept coming back. He stayed with God. And so here's Jeremiah doing the same thing. I mean, and I've never had my city destroyed. I've never had even my house burned down. I know people that have had a house burned down, and it's devastating to most of them. Even if they're physically fine, it's psychologically devastating. Can you imagine there? I'm sure there's people out there who can imagine, because you've lived through it in other places where, yes, that kind of devastation happened, but that doesn't happen here very often. And maybe the odd natural disaster kind of thing. So it's hard to imagine, but can you imagine your entire city getting destroyed? But not only that, that city is the thing that is the seat of God and represents your entire identity as a people. Is going to be destroyed, and then is destroyed, and not just broken down, but obliterated. How that would make you feel.
Well, and then to be told this wasn't just an accident.
Right.
It's because you've sinned.
Right.
It's because you've rejected God.
Right.
You could have stopped this. Yeah.
That though helps me appreciate when when Nehemiah, he's so upset that the walls have like it's weird. Like it sounds weird. Like why? But again, this is their identity. This is the seat. This is where God sits. So even though they had rebuilt the temple at that point, I mean, I guess I don't know what it would be like.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of directions we could go with this conversation, and a lot of thoughts are going through my mind. Do you think that the way ancient cities functioned, we don't really have ties to cities the same way. We're so transient and willing to move across the country if we get a job offer or something. Like, I mean, there's something about that too. Like, the city was not just the place where your home happened to be.
Right. It was home. I mean, it was your whole family.
It was your family.
Everybody's there. It's where you've been forever.
Yeah.
I think that's a fairly modern. The difference now is a fairly modern development. People didn't tend to move around that much.
Right.
Till the automobile.
Right.
Or at least around there in the train, I guess. But I think that's some of it. But I was thinking, just occurs to me, like Jesus wept over the impending destruction of Jerusalem or of Israel in his day. And so maybe there's something there too.
Yeah. Jeremiah wept.
But it's definitely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's hard to listen to for me. Mostly that's what I do these days. And it was just I mean, it's heartbreaking.
So does it get better? Like, do we get to look into Ezekiel and get any better?
No.
No.
Not really.
Not a lot, but
Ezekiel's bad from a different perspective, I think.
Yeah. I do think, and we'll talk about this in the next video. Hope maybe some of the people watching this have already read Ezekiel, but I think it leans a little bit more into some hope than even Jeremiah does.
Oh, for sure.
So
for sure.
We get to talk about that next time.
Jeremiah is definitely a book of, here it is, the sort of the clock's run out, my patience is run out. Like, we might have to do with our kids sometimes. All right, that last straw, and then the tears come out and everything. But it just seems like Israel just didn't do that. Jeremiah did, and no doubt others. But as a whole, they just kind of went,
Yeah.
And that's frightening, because how easy is that? I mean, our nation, every nation does this. Our nation, you got to be careful we're not doing that as a church, and then as individuals. where we just kind of look at what God says and go, eh. And you and I preach, and our job is to put the warnings out there.
Take it serious.
Like Ezekiel is going to do, like Jeremiah, like all these other prophets, many of whom don't get listened to.
Yeah.
So the lesson here is do what God says, and things will work out, right? His plans are not going to be foiled by anything you or I do. But it also kind of tells us maybe we need to look deeper into what his plans actually are, right? They're not about me, per se. They're not about making my life easy or fun. It may end up being that way.
Sure.
It may not.
Sure.
And we need to look at what's God really trying to accomplish. And in Jeremiah I was trying to make a holy people, and you aren't.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a big question. What is God's purpose? What is God trying to do? Trying to make a holy people, I would argue, for his glory. I think that's the ultimate goal. It's not for you and me, it's for God's glory.
It's to our benefit, but it's not, right? That's not the end goal. And I think that's hard maybe we're going to get metaphysical real quick, but we're not God. God's outside of space and time and all this.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for us to imagine. We can only imagine a tyrant or someone doing that and all the problems that brings. And yet, that's not what's happening here.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's leave it there. And we'll bring up Ezekiel next time.
We're going to talk about Ezekiel.
And so if you haven't read it, go ahead and read it. And we just hope that you're following along with us.
Pay attention to all the weird things Ezekiel has to do. They're even weirder than what Jeremiah did.
Very strange. Very strange
Maybe
things.
In all of Scripture, some of the strangest things that God's had a prophet do in order to illustrate his point.
Yeah. So in the meantime, while you're reading, like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you and your friends watching this content. We think it could be really helpful for you.
Make some comments.
Let us know what you want to hear about. Ask your questions in the comments below, and we'll do our best to address them. Until next time, we'll talk to you later, guys.
All right.
Bye.